Okay, welcome. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about dashboards and scorecards. I know I wrote a little bit about this in the lesson, but wanted to spend a few minutes going into detail. A, what dashboards and scorecards are, how they're different, and then B, some techniques you can use to make more effective reporting dashboards and scorecards. So first off, let's just look at a dashboard. Definition of a dashboard is, there we go. A dashboard is a visual display of the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives. It's typically consolidated and arranged on a single screen so that the information can be monitored at a glance. Now, this definition from Stephen Few, who's a leading consultant on data visualization, basically talks about how it's sort of that snapshot. And if you look at Google Analytics, it's exactly what Google Analytics is. Google Analytics is a dashboard. You log into the tool, you look for specific information, and very quickly and easily you can interpret what's going on and understand how your site is performing against key metrics. A scorecard, on the other hand, is really about progress against goals. So if you look at this sort of matrix here, you can see on some key issues around data and communication, you can see there that purpose, usage, updates, and whatnot, that dashboards and scorecards differ in a number of ways. So first off, a dashboard displays performance. Typically, this is done in real time, whereas a scorecard displays progress against goals and is typically used more in a management context. So you see the speed at which you get information or updates on a dashboard is done real time, whereas a scorecard is usually giving you some snapshot. As an example, it's a monthly, it could be a weekly snapshot, it could be a daily snapshot, it could be a quarterly snapshot. But the idea is that a scorecard is taking a picture in time, while a dashboard is keeping up with real-time events. So again, looking at the data, a dashboard is really quantifying the events, whereas a scorecard is summarizing what's been happening over a period of time. Typically, a dashboard includes metrics, whereas a scorecard might use the term key performance indicators, because typically in a scorecard, have some knowledgeable relationship with what you know to be important. And on the metric side, you're really dealing with, any number of metrics that you're trying to monitor. And again, we talked earlier about the alerts and annotations within Google Analytics. It's really dashboarding is about identifying the exceptions and when you need to be paying attention to the data, whereas the scorecard is referencing more about how you're performing against a specific known target. Ideally, dashboards link directly with systems. They're pulling data. It's very operational, whereas a scorecard at times is linked to strategic plans and is used with aggregated data to better understand how you're performing against those plans. Dashboard comes from the term dashboard, right? So if the car here, if you look at a car dashboard, all of these tools essentially are linked directly to systems. So you have your RPMs, you know how your engine is performing, you know how much fuel you have, you know your engine temperature, you know what gear you're in, and you know at what speed you're moving. And there's some summarization, if you will, of how much distance you've traveled. All of this is a dashboard because it's very specific to the context of your trip. Whereas a map might be more of a scorecard, right? So helping you understand how many more miles you have to go to your destination. If you're taking a 500-mile trip and you're 342 miles into that trip, then you know essentially how much progress you've made against your target, so to speak, and that would be more of a scorecarding context. So I hope that helps in understanding the difference between the two. But when developing a dashboard, the first thing you really want to do is understand its purpose. So you want to understand your target audience and how they plan on using it, and really understand the value the dashboard is going to provide. So you need to know the important metrics and the messages that you want to communicate, and really have a good feel for what the organization cares about on a regular basis and how they'd like to stay informed in that. Really what you want to do when you're laying out a dashboard is to focus on user engagement. So I know we talked a little bit about pre-attentive communication, and you want to make sure that whatever you're communicating in the dashboard visually reinforces what it is that you would want to say, and make sure that it has navigation, interactions, and capabilities that allow people to explore the data. So because the dashboard isn't necessarily giving you a summary of a report against a target, that individual may want to spend some time with the dashboard to go through different pieces of information to understand better what's happening. And then obviously in interface, you want to make sure you're taking care of usability and interface design principles, and that you're really focusing on your charting and data presentation skills. Because what you're doing, again, is you're providing a visual summary what is happening at a specific moment in time, and you want that individual or your audience for the dashboard to be able to get those key takeaways as easily and quickly as possible. So again, kind of focusing on the purpose, there are three key questions you can ask when putting together a dashboard. Who is my audience? Is this an executive dashboard? Is this a dashboard for myself? Is this a dashboard for my team? That'll really help inform what it is that you need to be including on the dashboard. What value will it provide? So if you're spending the first hour of your day going through and pulling a number of different reports, your time to value in developing a dashboard will be much greater if you know that you're eliminating those sort of 5 hours of work each week, which could add up to 250 plus hours a year. If you got a 40-hour dashboard project in front of you, then you know your time to value is going to be well spent. And then also think about what type of dashboard you're creating. And what I mean by that is really think through how you're going to visually communicate this. Is this something that's going to be a web-based interface? Is this something that is going to be a one-page PowerPoint presentation that gets pulled together and automated on a regular basis? So spend some time thinking about the mechanism by which you will create and distribute that dashboard as well. So what do you need to know about the people that you're working with? What decisions do they make? What questions do they need answered? Making sure that you're structuring that information to make it super easy to answer those high priority questions. Understand their workflow. When will they be reviewing the dashboard? In what context? Daily, weekly? How much time do they have to review the numbers? Make sure that you're creating the form and information display in a way that allows them to get at that information very easily. So if this person is on the road and you're trying to deliver information to their BlackBerry or other mobile device, you would not want to design a dashboard that is looks best on a widescreen monitor per se. Data comfort and skills. How sophisticated are they with data? Are they comfortable in Excel? Do they enjoy digging into the numbers? Here you want to also replicate. The dashboard needs to provide a level of detail that matches the analytical capabilities of the audience. So if you have someone that's not comfortable with data, don't have them dig through the data. Do not make it an exploratory dashboard. Make it a very simple summary. Whereas if you're giving maybe a dashboard to another analyst, you know that other analyst may want to dig into the data, sort of get curious about what's in there, and then kind of make sure that they're able to do that with the dashboard that you're providing them. And then business and data expertise. How familiar are they with the business metrics? Do they understand where the data comes from? Are they familiar with the terminology? So making sure that if there are questions about the data, if they want to know where it comes from or why certain numbers are the way that they are, maybe that they feel unnecessarily high or low, make sure that at some point that your audience has familiarity with the methodologies that you're using to pull the dashboard. An example would be Google Analytics. Make sure that your audience understands how Google Analytics counts visitors, that handshake between the cookie and the JavaScript tag, and let them know that there are times where that communication may or may not happen very well, and that could have an impact on the numbers. Maybe there was a site redesign that was done just recently, and so traffic has fluctuated in a way that's interesting. Make sure that that's getting communicated in the dashboard as well. So I know that's a lot of stuff to digest, but these are all things that you want to be thinking about. And for those of you that have taken sort of information display or usability classes, all of this stuff should look very familiar to you, because essentially a dashboard is exactly that. It's just a user interface for data. When we're talking about metrics, what we want to do is we want to make sure that they're actionable, that they're commonly interpreted, that they're transparent and simple, and that they're coming from credible data. So you want to make sure that if a problem or necessary action needs to take place, whether or not this metric goes up, down, flat, or for some reason is off target. So sometimes it's too broad for people to understand. So a measure like customer satisfaction sometimes is difficult because simply you just don't know what to do just because customer satisfaction is up or down. So what you want to do sometimes is make sure that you're focusing on the changes and not the absolute measures. So maybe it is that customer satisfaction at 88 might not mean something, but customer satisfaction that is down 15% from the same period last month, that's something that obviously you would want to investigate. Another thing is make sure that people have a common interpretation, that they recognize what the metric means. And so sometimes we use terminology like leads versus prospects that make it really difficult for people to know, well, what is a lead, what is a prospect? If your organization relies on information or specific information with specific terminology, make sure that at some point that dashboard has a link to a glossary so that everyone can commonly understand what those terms are. Um, Make sure that people understand how the metric is generated, and that it's very easy to understand. Sometimes organizations like to create their own specialty metrics that combine a number of different metrics with a number of different weightings. They call it maybe their site score or something like that. Typically, that's not very helpful because it doesn't lead to a simple understanding of what's actually happening and kind of going back to the actionable piece. If there are multiple numbers contained within a metric, it's hard to know which component of that is truly actionable. And then make sure that it's credible data. So, make sure that it's coming from sources that people trust. Maybe it's a system that the company has used in the past, and that they're very comfortable with understanding and interpreting data from that system. And one thing to avoid is chasing that perfect metric. So a lot of times you're trying to create the one measure that is going to summarize everything, when a lot of times it's helpful to just simply use a proxy measure that is close to the actual outcome you want. So maybe leads and prospects, kind of going back to that earlier. Maybe rather than using those terms, you would just simply use something like form complete on the website. So whether or not that person is a lead or prospect at that point is based on maybe some different sales criteria, maybe type of company they work for, maybe their geographical location before they move from a lead to a prospect. Something like form complete is a really good proxy measure because it just simply says people are completing information on the website. And whether or not we want more of that behavior to take place, that's something that we can optimize to. So that's just a way to think about metrics and the type of metrics that would go on a dashboard. You want to make sure that people can understand them very quickly and that they're action oriented as well. So probably the biggest key between dashboards and reporting is really this concept of exploration versus reporting. Um, so typically, reporting is helping you monitor and evaluate things that are already well understood and predictable. And so you kind of already know where this data is going and where it's moving, and you're just really using the reporting functionality to get specific around what you already know to be true to some extent. Exploration, on the other hand, is really about defining and finding new insight in the data. So having the data available to you in a way that allows you to kind of go digging and poking around in that and explore what's happening with the business to see if there's something that you can uncover that previously hadn't been uncovered before. And while there's no steadfast rule, a dashboard can certainly do reporting, and a scorecard can certainly facilitate exploration. The general concept is that you want to make sure that you're sort of clearly identifying when you're just trying to report progress and giving people the appropriate amount of status that they need, and then simultaneously understanding when you want the data to allow people to explore and find new things, and make sure that you're developing the tools that facilitate either or, and that you're explicit and clear that you want the tool to be able to facilitate one or the other. There's nothing more frustrating that I find in a lot of meetings is when people try to do exploration with a very simple report and then start inferring a lot of things that simply aren't true or not available in the data. There's no evidence in the data simply because the report was not constructed to be explored. And so if that person wanted to go down that path, be happy to give them the information that they needed to be able to do that, but that the current tool in their hand at that point was not designed for them to do exploration. And can't say how many countless meetings have been derailed when this principle gets violated. So it's something that I believe in strongly, and want to reinforce that to your students, that if you go into this type of work, or even if you're someone that is getting reports, that you understand that when you're getting a reporting report, for lack of a better term, that you're not trying to do exploration with that, and that if you really want to do some digging, that you make requests to those that are supporting you, that they're giving you information in a way that allows you to do that exploration and not try to infer too much from a very basic, simple, updated report. So here are some common delivery methods, and this is just a simple chart on pluses and minuses on how you might want to think about delivering that information. So a lot of times, sometimes you're just going to write one-page paper report. You can make those look really good. They're really easy to take with them. You can share them via email as attachments. You can make them very dense. But the problem is a lot of times they take time to create, so they're not very timely. Sometimes they're difficult to move around. They're definitely not interactive. And you can see here some other characteristics of maybe a paper presentation. Has a lot of the same weaknesses as a one-pager, but you can certainly go into more detail. Excel can be done timely with a tremendous amount of detail. Online apps you can see have a lot of value in terms of timeliness, connectivity, and data detail and interactivity. And the emails and large screen data sometimes serve other purposes as well. So again, when you're thinking about from a reporting standpoint, how timely you want it to be, whether or not aesthetics are important, whether it's a client-facing report or an internal report, there are a lot of different issues that you can wrestle with. And here are some good ways to think about delivery methods when you're looking at this. Again, here's something where you have a good flow. So making sure that if you're doing something that allows for exploration, that the individual using the dashboard can follow the flow. So in this case, you have campaign report where you have a total number of impressions that flows into the type of demographics of individuals that those impressions were served against, and then how they index against specific components of the internet population, which then drills down into the markets and the education level. So there's a nice logical flow here. A person can kind of follow the data and the trail that it creates, and they use a lot of visual aesthetics to sort of drive you deeper into the analysis to better understand how that campaign is reaching a specific audience. So what you want to think about is on an interface design, sort of on the previous dashboard, you can see where you want your users to focus, what's the priority of communication. So in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that's very green. That's basically where the total impressions lived. And then as you see, you can drill down into more meaningful metrics that those might not be as important, and that this sort of framework allows you to follow the train of thought. Typically, the upper left-hand corner is the most focused, and the lower right-hand corner is the least focused, so you want to make sure that the things that are of greater priority are higher up on the page and to the left. Color is another good way to communicate things, so you can convey things sequentially by using different shades of the same color. So in this example, moving from low to high, you can use two different colors to show how metrics may be diverging from a critical neutral midpoint. And so things that are red are much higher than the midpoint, and things that are blue are much lower than the midpoint. And then categorical, you want to make sure that you're using a tremendous amount of contrast. If you're trying to communicate that things are in different buckets, you want to make sure that those colors are very different. If you're using sort of a singular color palette of green to communicate different categories, that would be more confusing than just simply using colors that have a tremendous amount of contrast in them. Some other tips, do not use contrast in line graphs or to use them for background fields. So you can see the graph on the left is just not as elegant as the graph on the right. And then you'll see in the lower left-hand corner here, you are basically communicating the word sales twice. And so if sales is the title of the graph, you don't necessarily need the data points to have a key to explain that those are sales as well. You do not want to smooth your graphs. So one important part is you want to be able to identify all the discrete data points. And so smoothing a graph makes that difficult to understand what the specific numerical data point was. And then sorting, if things are categorical and they're not moving over in a time series graph, it's typical to move those categories from left to right with, again, the thing that you want to communicate most importantly on the left, and then the thing you want to communicate least importantly lower and down to the right. So here you can see how Merck and their sales are much higher, and so I can order rank Merck, Pfizer, Novartis, Lilly, Abbott Labs, and Roche. I can do that very easily by following the ranking or hierarchy implied in the visualization, and not necessarily following on the left. You see an alphabetical notation, which is a little more difficult to read. Again, tapping into those pre-attentive capabilities that people have when looking at graphs. So that's just a quick rundown of dashboards and scorecards and a couple of different tips on how to make your dashboards more effective. I'm going to post a couple of examples. This is one thing you'll want to be thinking about over the course of this class is as part of your final project, I'm going to expect a report. So it necessarily won't be a dashboard, but as you're giving me a summarization of different data points, this might be a good lecture to kind of reference back to as you're constructing your graphs and thinking about how you want to communicate specific points to me. So Thank you. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.